listening to Unfiltered with Muhammad Uncut, a podcast about personal growth and authentic leadership. If you're looking for tips on how to manage others, get ahead, and make your way up the corporate ladder, this is not the show for you. This podcast is about being of service to others, leading from the heart, and evolving into a better version of yourself. Each episode brings you motivated stories about unfiltered leadership and authentic leaders, those who involve others, use their influence to amplify diverse perspectives, and inspire teams to achieve collective results. If this sounds like you, keep listening. Hello and welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast. This podcast is about self-transformation. It's about defining leadership as we see ourselves leaders who are transforming to better lead ourselves so that we can lead others. And we have someone who's made his life a passion about talking about leadership, believing about leadership, and helping others transform into better versions of themselves. Welcome to my unfiltered guest, Ken Wright. Thank you so much for being my guest. Thank you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mohammed. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
Likewise. And I should call out that I always get, it's amazing. It's 7 o'clock Eastern time here in London, Ontario, and it is 8 o'clock Australian time.
Yes, 8 o'clock in the morning.
It's 8 o'clock. It's already Tuesday morning. You know, it never ceases to amaze me that we are in the moment, you and I right now, but we are at different times. It's just, I find that as a subtle miracle that we overlook sometimes. So I thought I would start there because I always find it fascinating that we go on about our lives and people are kind of ahead of us, behind us. And that kind of leads me to the question about leadership. We go about our lives. Some people may be ahead of us in their experiences and their expertise, and others may need us to help them move along. So tell me about your passion for helping bring people onto the same time zone when it comes to feeling what leadership is all about.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mohammed. I came into leadership very early in my life. My dad was a butcher, and in Australia back in those days, many years ago, butchers were very well known for having great customer relationships. And I was about 12 or 13, and I used to hang around the butcher shop, and I'd observe how he dealt with customers and how he dealt with the other employees or team members that he had in the butcher shop. And sometimes it shocked me a bit because he was quite a strong leader. He was very hard with them. He had high expectations, but he was very fair. And at the time, I thought, wow, that's a little bit too harsh, but over time, I found out that strong leadership is very important as well. And so many leaders now that I work with, they don't have the courageous conversations when they should have them. And even more, don't have the caring conversations and really help people develop and grow. I suppose in 3 words, I would summarize, it's all about feelings. Probably that's 4 words. But leadership to me is how you make people feel.
Why is that so important? You know, you bring leadership to the level of introspection and you internalize it to our own experience. Yet leadership is about how we interact with others. So how do I bring leadership back into my feelings? Can you help me out there?
Yeah, I guess when I do presentations to groups of leaders, the first words that come out of my mouth when I walk onto the stage, I'd like you to think about the best leader you've ever had. And why was that person your best leader? And then I give them a few seconds to think about it. And invariably, it's how they made them feel. They cared for them. they developed them, they inspired them. There was nothing about, oh, they had a string of degrees and they had an MBA and they had this and they were excellent in creating strategies. That's all part of leadership. There's so many facets to leadership. But in this day and age, the people that are really successful as leaders, we all know that emotional intelligence became a big thing years ago now. But sadly, team engagement has hardly improved in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, Gallup, in all their statistics, around the world, there was about 30% of people passionately engaged. And now it's only about 33 or 34% in 10 years when we're supposed to be focusing on it.
When we are moving more towards talking about, as you mentioned, emotional intelligence and empathizing with others, but data is showing us the more connected we are, with these things, the less connected we are to each other, right? I'm looking at you, you're thousands of miles away. We're connected right now virtually. And as I mentioned, we are connected spatially in this time. Yet technology has, maybe to a certain extent, created a rift between how we connect. But I want to go back to what you said earlier. And Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you feel. And you're right. Leadership is about how we make people feel. And I looked at what you said earlier. The first thing when I asked you about your definition of leadership, you went to the person that role modeled that for you. You talked about your father. You saw someone that you respected, that you loved, that made you feel good. I would take it that you had a good relationship with your father. He had such a positive impact on you. And you saw how he had a positive impact on the people that he worked with. And that didn't always mean that he had to soften up to these people. He probably, as you said, sometimes leadership means we have to be tough. We have to, it's a tough love. It's a caring, but we also sometimes have to tell people, like a father, I have my 3 children. Being a father sometimes isn't always about doing or saying the easy things, and being a leader isn't always about taking the soft way out. You've done this for how many years? You've been doing this about 30 years now? I'm timing you?
Yeah, how many years? Yeah, well, I had my career. I'll just go back how it all started.
Would love that.
I left school at 16 to play professional sport. And that didn't work out. So I had joined the bank at the same time in a country town in Victoria, Australia. And Horsham was that town. And as I said, my dad was a butcher there, and I'd learned a lot about people skills and that from him. In fact, he told me 3 things. He said, if you live your life focusing on making people feel special, the law of reciprocity, and give first and you'll get things back, and customer service. And he told me, you've got to wow the customer. And this was back when I was 13, so back in about 1960, 62 or something. And when I wrote my book, people said, you can't talk about the wow factor. Tom Peters wrote The Pursuit of Wow. Someone else wrote, da-da-da. And I said, well, my dad taught me about it about 50 years ago. And then I told them the story, because in Horsham, there were 3 core resources: wheat, oats, and wool. And every year we had a wow week, which was wheat, oats, and wool. And there were parades in the street, etc. And he had a sign on his butcher shop, it's wow week, come in, we're wowing the customer. And he had little gimmicks, like there'd be a sign under the bench and the butcher would be talking to a customer and they'd say, I'll have 3 pounds of lamb chops. And they'd hold up the sign, wow, between 10 and 11, lamb chops are free. So he did that sort of stuff. So they allowed me to talk about that in the book. Anyway, I left school at 16. The sport didn't work out and I joined the bank at the time. And I thought, well, now I'm really going to have to focus on my life in the bank. And I had to get educated, so I went back and did some night school, etc., and got a degree, etc., as everyone does. And anyway, I noticed in the bank that there were about half the people. It was quite a large bank in Australia. There was, 15,000 employees or something, and about half them were saying, oh, it's not a bad place to work. I'll just stay here for a couple of years and earn a bit of money and then travel, or, oh, I might go and work in the mines and earn some real money. And so I made a focus that I was going, and I called it being an entrepreneur. I didn't have to put money up to get that job or anything. And I thought, I'm going to work as though it's my business. And it was very successful. Not that I was that great, but I was showing a lot more positive attitude and that than the majority of others. And I became the youngest bank manager, the youngest general manager. And it was a great opportunity for me to develop myself and help other people develop.
And I believe you were 23 at the time?
Yes.
Right, you were 23 as a bank manager, and people that you were quote unquote managing were sometimes double your age.
Oh, yes.
And I mean, we see that today a little more, but I don't think that was very common back then. And my full respect when I say back then, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? Just today, things have hyper sped with technology. We think everything is so immediate, right? We forget that these stories were very relevant. And what I heard from you, the same sort of leadership that you saw in your father, the same sort of respect for the tradition of what he provided in terms of service to his clients, right? And the way that he treated people that worked with him. You took that leadership to the bank and you were accountable. When you say that I wanted to do it well and you looked around you and you did it better than others, that sense of accountability, the entrepreneurial spirit, that comes back to that confidence that we want to feel good about what we do. We want to be in wholehearted, right? We don't want to do a half-assed job, excuse my language, right?
Yeah.
And right, I think you saw that role model by your father, by somebody that you believe was a leader. Was that a conscious realization or was that more subtle?
Yeah, that's interesting. The interesting thing about it is my dad died when I was 18. And at 18, we know everything. And I had a lot of challenges with him because I thought I knew everything and he knew nothing. But when I, knew nothing as far as what I wanted and all of that stuff. But it was when I became a leader, in my early to late 20s, when I realised it really came back to me how much he taught me and how much I learned in the butcher shop. And another quick little story there. I remember when as I said, about 13, hanging around the butcher shop. And I had paper rounds at that time. I had one in the morning where I'd start at 5 o'clock in the morning and one in the evening. And I did what he told me to do, give great customer service. And when I would deliver the papers to them, if it was raining, I would take the papers in and put them on their porch or their veranda, as we say in Australia. And in those days, often they had milk delivered to the front gate. So I'd take the milk in with me and put it on the veranda. And around Christmas time in Australia, we used to get the paper boys and paper girls would get tips from their customers sent in to the newsagent. And the newsagent would bring our tips down and give them to us. And I used to get 5 or 6 times more tips than the other paper boys and girls. And they said to me, if you ever leave here, Ken, we want your paper round. You've got the most generous customers. Yeah. They didn't realise, obviously, that it was law of reciprocity.
And you took me to exactly what I was thinking. What we give is what we get. Karma has, I think of it like a boomerang. If you put out positive vibes, those positive vibes will come out back at you. Like a boomerang you throw and it comes back. Same thing with negative vibes. So, if we treat people with respect, we treat people with honesty, and we're transparent in our interactions with them, and we make them feel good.
Yeah.
That's going to make us feel good. And it's
you talked about it.
People, right?
You talked about that quote before.
Maya Angelou.
About how you make people feel. And Mother Teresa had a great one as well, that there is more need for love and appreciation in the world than for bread.
Yes.
And people ask Mother Teresa, why did she, when she did all these things to make people feel special, and she said it was selfish because it made me feel so good when I did it. And that's when I work with people and coach leaders, I pick up, say they've got a bit of a selfish trait in them. I will just say to them, oh, Bill, next week, let's just find 5 times when we can do a random act of kindness. It mightn't cost any money, but it's someone in a supermarket queue that's in a rush, let them go first. Let someone in when you're driving, when they're waiting, or whatever it is, just a random act of kindness. And there's just a string of amazing stories that I've had from people. And one that I worked with in Georgia that was known as, being, pretty selfish. He, in the end, he changed that around because he understood when he did these random acts of kindness. And the first week I asked him to do 5. He reported back to me the next week when we were chatting, and he said, oh, one was fantastic. He said there was these 3 young military people that were having lunch in this place where I was having a coffee. And they were arguing over the bill. No, I didn't have that. You had that. You owe more. You owe more than me. So he went to the counter and paid their bill anonymously, and then walked out. He told me he did wait out the front to make sure they didn't get charged as well. But that just gave me a real buzz because it was a turning point for him when he realised how great it made him feel.
Was there ever a turning point when these sort of realizations were more conscious for you, or was this just part of who you are?
I think it was a bit of an innate thing because I did see my dad do that. He had a couple of rental properties, and one of the people that were renting one of his properties unexpectedly had triplets, and they were really struggling financially. And I forget how long it was, but it was something like 6 months. He said, don't worry about paying your rent. We let them live there rent-free for 6 months. Right. So things like that. I can't say I've ever done anything as generous as that, but that was sort of things that came, you know, I learnt them from an early age. But I have had to work on it, the same as I feel it is so important to acknowledge and recognise people. Like the 1 Minute Manager said, find someone doing something right and tell them about it. And I had to teach myself to do that, because when I was first a leader, there was all these other things you had to do. You had to do budget, you had to do this. And if you're not careful, you get tied down with all the hard skills. And especially when you get really busy, you forget the most important things of recognising people. So on my phone, and I still hear feedback from people that I've coached, and they do this, you know, and on my phone, I put the little sticky tabs like you'd put when you sign here. I put 3 of them down the left-hand side of my phone in the morning. And I'd move them over to the right-hand side when I did the right thing by acknowledging and recognising someone. I had to do that for a couple of years before it became second nature.
When things get really quick and things get really fast, we forget to pause and do the things that matter. And, you know, it becomes part of our lifestyle. We create these habits where we're rushing and we don't, you know, the old expression, which is slow down to smell the flowers, right? Well, slow down to smile in somebody's face and slow down to, you know, maybe pay it forward. Like if you're at a drive-through, you know, maybe buy the coffee for the guy behind you, right? Right? It's maybe not paying for 6 months rent, but in this time when people are really feeling a pinch, COVID has really changed things around for a lot of people. People have lost their jobs and their livelihood. So can we be more charitable, right? And, you know, I think about this often. When I do a good deed, I feel good. And it's not necessarily that I want people to look and say, oh, look at him. Like, you know, most of the times I do a good deed. I teach my kids every day before they leave the house to put something in Arabic called sadaqah, which is charity. We got a little box. And at the end of the month, we count the money and we have adopted an orphan. And then we send the money to that orphan, right? And so my kids know now they don't leave the house until they put that sadaqah or charity. And I've taught them to believe that when they give charity, it will prevent something ominous from happening. We have a belief that if you give, then something that could have happened to you, maybe a car accident or a bird pooping on you or whatever it is, may not happen to you because you've put goodness out there and goodness is going to come back. And so a lot of the time when I have the conversations about ego and your ego wants to feel good, I don't think we always have to beat our ego. It's okay if we teach our ego to be proud of the good things that we do, but ask it to learn to be humble. You know, the ego is part of us. So why constantly be in a fight to annihilate the ego, right? I'm going to ask you, maybe you can educate me. You've got a lot more experience in this than I do. When it comes to the ego, you talked about feeling good and that selfish goodness. Even Mother Teresa did it. Hey, if Mother Teresa can do something selfish when she's doing good, then maybe I can get away with it as well.
Yeah. And a lot of it is learned behavior. And like I still coach, like I was up at 5 o'clock this morning, my time, and I had 3 hours of phone calls with guys in America that I'm working with. And they're friends now because I've been working with a lot of those people for a long time. And even though I've been working with them for a long time, in this COVID times, it is so important about how you make people feel. And they were really busy doing stuff. And one of them was talking to me this morning about, I said, 2 weeks ago, we talked about that you were having difficulty with your boss, and your boss would come in and she was very demanding and, would not talk about the 99 good things you did, but would just jump on the one thing that you could have done better. And I said, 2 weeks ago, I said to him, how long is it since you sent a card to her, a handwritten card? And he said, I never have. And I said, well, find something that she does really well and send her a card. And 2 weeks ago, he did that because she had some great skills and that as well. And he said, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The next couple of interactions in the last couple of weeks that I've had with her, she hasn't picked on me about anything.
It's the little things. It's how you make people feel. I'm going to share something with you, Ken. I haven't disclosed this to many people, and certainly not in the podcast or on air, but whenever I have a connection with somebody, I get teary-eyed. And that's happened to me a few times during these interviews. And when I'm speaking with you and hearing your overflowing goodness, and I'm not just saying that today, but a few weeks ago when we connected and you accepted to be one of my guests, right away you asked one of your colleagues to send me this book by mail. And I thought to myself, maybe I could have gotten this off Amazon for $20 or $30. I know it's worth its price in gold. But that gesture of you sending out your book to me really touched me here. I thought, this person doesn't know me. He lives halfway across the world, all the way across the world. In Australia, I'm in Canada. And he's generous enough to ensure that I can learn from the knowledge that he has, that he wants to share with me. So this is Ken's book, everyone, The People Pill, that I haven't read yet. But do you know when I received this book, Ken? 3 hours before our interview today.
Yes.
Went to the mail at 4:30 today. I came back from the funeral. I had a funeral today, and I came back from the funeral. I went and picked up my mail, and I saw a gift in my mail. And I opened that up, and I thought, wow, I'm speaking with Ken tonight. I don't believe in flukes. I don't believe in coincidence. I believe that there's a greater force, and we're asked to interact with that greater force. And the more that we're in tune with what's going on in the universe, the more we become part of the universe, and the universe becomes part of us. And as Rumi, the poet, said, we are the universe in constant motion in our heart. And, we're spiraling to learn and to grow. And today, that universe brought us together. You're sharing stories of your father. I have to tell you this as well. My father was not a butcher, but he owned a coffee shop. My first job was a newspaper boy. I went from door to door, and my first TV, black and white TV that I had 8 years later in First University was the one I won because I was the #1 newspaper boy. On our Christmas tree, one of my clients, when I was a newspaper boy, gave me a little bell that she crocheted. I still have that till a few years back. So when you put goodness out there, you will feel it. And today the world needs that goodness. And so I just want to pause and say thank you for the effortless goodness that you've been putting out there, and your knowledge that you share with people, and the coaching that you do, and sharing that. And I would like to go to your knowledge and ask you, what has been some of the best learning opportunities for you that has allowed you to grow and transform into the kind and giving person that you've become? And don't be too modest here.
Well, I think back to the first book I read, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie? Yeah. And I think that was written in 1930 or 1932 or something. I think it's the biggest selling book ever. Over 50 million copies of that book were sold. And that really struck me, because a lot of it was what my dad had talked to me about anyway. And then there was Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, which was in the 1950s written, I think. And when I moved to America after I resigned from the bank because I was head of financial services at Westpac, and we had about 20,000 staff then. And I resigned because I couldn't go along with what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to, excuse my language, but basically screw the customer and screw the team. And we need more money out of this. It's a cash cow of the bank. And I couldn't just go along with it. So I resigned. And it cost me a lot of money to resign. And I'd been separated for about 20 years or 10 years. And I'd met another lady who was a speaker, and you know of her, Amanda Gore. And she was living in America at the time. And so I moved to America. She's an Australian and an amazing speaker. And so I moved to America and we got married in Dallas. And she said to me, yeah, the stuff you talk about, sorry, my phone was ringing. The stuff you talk about how you built and developed people and built that business up at Westpac, you've got to write a book about that. I said, write a book? I said, it'll be about 5 pages long. And she said, as Amanda would, I just do it. So I went through the process of writing that book, and I put what I used to call butcher's paper, the large white sheets of paper around our dining room, because I'd moved to America. Amanda was traveling about 200 days of the year, speaking all around America. I didn't know anyone in America, and I didn't even have a car license or anything when I got there. And so I was sitting at home and I'd open a bottle of wine at night, and I was thinking about, I'd put 7 chapters around on this butcher's paper, and I would write notes about how to recognize people, how to performance manage, etc., and stick them around. And that was the start of writing that book. And then I talked to the producers about it, and they wanted me to write something like 400 pages or something, because a lot of the books, Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence, etc., and all of those books were like 400 pages. And I said, no. I said, I used to give out all these books as prizes when I was a leader. And the only books that got read were the 200 pages or the easy reads like the 1 Minute Manager or Present and these type of things, because I would ask them a couple of weeks later after I gave them the book.
Did you read it?
Yeah, or tell me about what was the key point of the book to you, etc. And if they had these small books, they'd read them and they could tell me something about it. When I gave them a big book, it was like, you have to strap yourself in to read it. They would recite to me a couple of things that was written on the back cover of the book. So I knew they hadn't read it. And so that was a major thing that I wanted to do. I wanted it to be more a self-help, a great index if someone was having problem or wanted to recognize people better or wanted to performance manage people, they could go to that and read 5 or 10 pages. But it was also a book that only had, less than 200 pages. So people could read it on a plane flight.
And action it, right?
Yeah.
If we wanted to read Don Quixote, we read Don Quixote or War and Peace, but we want to read something that we can actually put into action and learn from it.
Yeah. So that was, I forgot where I was going with that, but that the books like that I resonated with were ones that were easy reads and not too, I'm sure there's heaps of great books out there that are, 400 or 500 pages, but they're not something that, I would pick up and buy because, as I said, it's really, you've got to strap yourself in to read them. And some people try and make the written word too complicated. I'm a very simple person. I just want to make it, an easy read.
Well, tell me how you've applied some of that learning or yourself have learned from it and how you've applied it to, developing healthy relationships. Leaders are seeing, and I want to kind of just pause here yet again, because I use the word leader often, but my version of a leader, and I'd love to hear I'd like to hear what you think a leader is. Is it someone who manages people? Is it someone who others look to give them guidance? What is your definition of leader? Just so we're kind of on the same page here with the listener.
Yeah, very, very difficult because there are so many different facets to leadership. I think too many leaders focus on the hard skills. Like everyone has got the IQ to do the leadership role because everyone's educated now and they've got degrees and they've got Google if they need to look something up anyway. So the hard skills are a given. So, I think Daniel Goleman said it, IQ gets you the job, EQ gets you promoted. Yeah. But EQ, a lot of people think EQ or emotional intelligence is, knowing the other person. A lot of it is knowing yourself as well. You've got to know yourself. Right. And because so many leaders think they're connecting with people and, showing empathy, but they're thinking it's all about the other people, not about themselves. And they're doing things that a lot of people say, well, I don't respect that about that leader. I don't trust them. And if you lose trust and respect, you've lost everything. And so to answer your question, I guess, the hard skills are a given. And sure, you've got to do strategies and you've got to do everything else as a leader. But focus on the soft skills because the soft skills are the ones that are going to, get you promoted and make you successful. And I coined EQ2. I called it EQ2, which is engagement intelligence. And because emotional intelligence is fantastic, but the next step for me is engagement intelligence, really engaging people and finding out what drives and motivates them. Like people will say, well, no, you can't motivate anybody. Of course you can motivate someone. But if you find their hot buttons, what is it that drives that person? Is it that they want to be more educated? Do they want to learn and develop? Do they, too many leaders think, oh, it's just about money. Oh, we pay them a lot of money. They should be doing it. No one motivates me. Why should I have to motivate them? And as Zig Ziglar said, many leaders tell me motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. And that's why I recommend both daily. And that's what I say to many leaders, don't motivate them at your peril, because a motivated person that's fully engaged will be about 25% more productive. And all the statistics tell us that we should be recognising and acknowledging every person on your team at least every 14 days.
So every 14 days, we should be connecting, and kind of similar to what you mentioned about the leader or the manager sending out a card.
Yeah.
Is have that. I mean, we can do this daily, but be intentional about it often, right? And kind of like the yellow paper that you put on your phone, if you have to remind yourself and say, every 2 weeks, I need to make sure that I'm having a one-on-one with this person and connecting with them. Because when life gets fast, we drop the ball, right? When technology pushes us to get things done, we forget that we need to get things done with others. And we put profit sometimes over people, and we forget the connections that matter are really the connections that grow with getting to know other people and getting to know what makes them tick and what ticks them off as well, right? I think that's motivation.
Yeah. And once again, too many leaders think, well, getting a card wouldn't motivate me. It does motivate most people. Most people love getting a handwritten card, especially if it's been sent to their home address. Or
I'm pointing back because I've got bookshelves, and beneath the bookshelves, I have books, I have boxes, and in those boxes, you'd be surprised how many cards I have not thrown away.
Yeah.
When I was still a newspaper boy to, recently. I have a difficulty in throwing away, and it's amazing that you mentioned handwritten. If I get a card that's stamped that says Merry Christmas or Happy Ramadan, but it doesn't have the person's name or a wish from that person, it doesn't normally stay. But a card that from my kids or a friend that has some words in it, I always open it and I look at it. And I recycle some of them. I used to, it was Mother's Day, and I always looked at what I gave Mom a few years back to see if I could take that $4 card and recycle it back to her. But she got on to me one time. It's amazing because it really comes back down to this human connection. It's funny you're mentioning Daniel Goleman too, because I think he's out now with a new book called Social Intelligence. And I think you're kind of hinting on the next step is you've got the self-awareness, awareness of others. IQ is important. It's going to get you that job. EQ is going to create those relationships and maybe get you the promotion. But to your point, what's engagement, right? How do we engage with others? We don't live on an island. And most of us, well, especially today, we're physically distanced from people. We call it physical distancing and social isolation, but we've also isolated ourselves, and we don't need to. We don't need to emotionally isolate ourselves. So today more than ever, and now, here in North America, we're getting hit by a second wave. We're likely going to be, in some places, they're already facing some sort of a lockdown. We need to be very intentional not to break those authentic connections, even if they're virtual. I may not have the opportunity to meet you in person or to know I'm going to travel to Australia or you to Canada, but we can take advantage of technology to slow us down as well and to create these connections, be intentional about them.
Yeah, exactly. I have, there are some people that I've coached in America for, the ones I'm thinking of ones that I've never met face to face. And some of them I coached for 4 or 5 years and I'd never met them face to face. And we didn't even do face meetings like Zoom or anything because they were often out
just on the phone,
on a mobile phone or their cell phone. And but I have a great connection with those people. And we're getting back to the cards. I used to send out about 100 cards every month. When I was CEO of the financial services. Sure, I would get feedback from all the leaders. Oh, Mary did a fantastic job last month. She had 2 children home with the mumps, and she did a great job. So I would send her a card saying, oh, Mary, I know it wasn't your personal best, but what a great month you had, because I know you had 2 children home with the mumps. Or Bill, you moved house last month and you still achieved this, or, and they know that you as the boss knew what was going on. And I was coaching a guy in New Zealand that ran an insurance company. And I was talking to him. He had no ego at all, but it wasn't a huge insurance company, but it was about 300 or 400 people in the business. And I said, how long is it since you've been out around the branches and just seeing what people are doing? And he said, I don't do that. He said, I just feel that they think I'm the boss checking up on them. And I said, no, I love to see you out there. I just, just ask them questions, maybe one question of, is there anything that I could do to make your job easier or to make your job more enjoyable or whatever? And, is there one thing I could change? And and I also talked to him about the cards because he wasn't sending any cards out. And I said, they're really powerful, the cards, for 99% of people. And anyway, he visited over here in Australia and we went out to dinner, couple of months later. And I said, oh, how's it going? And I knew when I talked about the cards that he glazed over. I knew he wasn't going to do it. So he visited and we went out to dinner. I said, oh, how are the branch visits going? He said, oh, they're fantastic. He said, you're absolutely right. They just loved seeing me out there and they were so proud to show me of what they were doing, etc. And he said, yeah, excellent. I'm keeping doing them. I said, what about the cards? He said, oh, I've got a great story about the cards. He said, one of the first visits I went on, there was this card on this guy's desk. And I said to him, is that a personal card or a business card? He said, no, it's a business card. My boss sent it to me. And he said, oh, wow, I didn't know Andrew was sending cards out. And he said, oh, he's not. He said, it was a boss 2 times ago. And I thought, wow, he's kept it on his desk for 5 years or whatever. Yeah. And I said to him, so you're sending cards out now? And he said, no, but I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. You better think fast. And, it goes back to what you said earlier, Ken. It is all about how we make people feel, right? And I think it's so important, to just pause and think, what could I do for somebody else? And, you said it, you were telling this branch man, this leader to go around to the branches and ask people, what could I do differently? To listen, put your ear to the ground sometimes. And I used to work for this class, still work for this company. And the CEO at the time was, trying to connect with people that work there. He was traveling and trying to grow the business. It was an entrepreneurial company at the time. And when we were thinking, well, how does he connect with people better? Well, we came up with, why not once a month you have CEO breakfast? And it's 7 o'clock in the morning, you go out with people. Do you know, I've been with this company now, I've worked there full time for 22 years. One of the things that people still talk about was when they went out and had breakfast with the CEO, right? We did this maybe 2008, 2007. People will remember when you've been intentional about making them feel good. They'll remember the card, they'll remember the breakfast, they'll remember when you helped create a feeling in them when they could motivate themselves and they could feel that they could be better. And I want to ask you, I have not yet had the pleasure of reading your book. And I'm going to make a point, be intentional about it. But, I have something called the Unfiltered Thought of the Week. And that's where I ask the guest to share one piece of advice or insight that the listener can adopt or create a habit from, that they can become a better person or a better individual. I'm sure there are many nuggets of wisdom in this book. Could you share one of them with us?
Yeah, well, probably I think an above average leader is someone that purposefully develops and helps their people become better. Because I really believe that we can achieve and I know where it came from in me, but I've always believed that we can achieve, within reason, we can achieve anything we want to achieve, as long as you believe in it and you do the work. And I always talked about that. And when Amanda told me to write the book, she said that you've got to write in it about your personal success plan, which I called personal success plan, because it's page 18 to 24 in the book. And if any leader wants to know how to do if any leader listening to this wants to know how to do the personal success plan, if you put my email address in there somehow, if they email me, I will send them the chapter of the book that shows them how to develop people with my personal success plan. And basically what it is I get them to come up with the 10 skills and attributes that will make someone successful in their role. And if they can't think about them, in that chapter in the book, there's a list of attributes: authenticity, trust, respect, emotional intelligence, but they've got to own them. They've got to come up with their own list. And then I get them to, and every person I coach, I do this with as well, whether it's a CEO that's earning $1 million or it's someone that's earning $35,000. It doesn't matter. I think it works with everybody. I get them to come up with the 10 skills and attributes and then think of a role model in each of those skills and attributes who would be a 9 or a 10. If they know someone who's highly emotionally intelligent, would be a 9 or a 10, honestly rate yourself now where you would be, 1 being very poor, 10 being you cannot improve. Rate yourself honestly and do that in each of the skills and attributes you came up with. And then I say, focus on one of those skills and attributes every month and aim to improve it by 10%. You rated yourself a 5, try and improve it to a 6. And don't necessarily pick, your lowest one. Sometimes, like Marcus Buckingham said, sometimes it's building on your strengths is more important than working on your weaknesses. So if
it's that momentum, right? Building that momentum. It's building that momentum. It gets easier when the ball is rolling.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just incremental improvement. You're just, working on those things. And I do that with everyone every team that I've managed, I've done that with, get them to do that. They know I do it myself. I have a coach in America that I work with, and I get him to kick my butt if I haven't done what I said I was going to do. And it's about, I hold the people accountable that I work with. And they pick one thing they're going to work on, and invariably they work on 2 or 3 things at the one time because everyone wants to improve and, to be able to say, and I then get them, like at the moment, the people I'm working with in America, it's really 6 months that I work with them. And after 3 months, I get them to re-rate themselves where they are in those 10 skills and attributes. And we will be working on, some of those things as we go along. So I think, to me, that is something that any leader can do. And as I said, if I feel you're an above average leader, if you're focusing on developing people to be the best they can be. Give them belief, help them believe that they can achieve something. I believe that having the belief that you can do it is more important than having the skill. A quick story there with Lance Armstrong. When he got testicular cancer, and the Texas oncologist basically said to him that, Lance, you might as well go home and die. Didn't say it in those words, but we can't do anything for you. And he said, no, cancer picked the wrong body. And he was going to fight it. And he fought it, and he had the same access to any drugs or anything that other people that had cancer had. Some of them went home and laid on the couch and died. He said, no, I'm going to recover from this. And then he went on, no matter what people think of him, taking drugs or whatever, he went on to win 7 Tour de France's
Right.
after the cancer. And most of the others were on drugs anyway. And like I say, jokingly, I say, well, when I was on drugs, I couldn't find my friggin' bike. But, he believed that he could do it. And I could give you a raft of things that people said to me. You'll never be a bank manager. There's no bank manager been a bank manager before 30. You won't be a bank manager before 30. And that just fired me up because I believed that I could do it. And I did the things, the hard work, sure. And after I finished playing football, I started to get heavy, and I was in my mid-30s, and I'd stopped doing all the weights and exercises and everything. And I put on, in kilos, probably about 10 kilos, 20 odd pound. And I thought, well, I've got to do something about that. And when I played football, I detested running. If they said we're going to run 5 miles, I said, what for? So anyway, I started running, and I made a commitment that within 6 months I was going to run a marathon. And from being 10 kilos overweight, walk, run, starting, and within about 4 months, I ran my first marathon. Not a great time, but I aimed to run it in under 4 hours, and I did it in 3 hours 50. And all because I believed that I could do it and did the work. Too many
skills sometimes are mechanical, right? But belief, that allows us to have faith. And faith you can't measure, you can't see, right? I can measure your skills. I can tell you how you're doing. But when it comes to believing, when it comes to having that positivity that you can run the marathon, that you can win 7 Tour de France's and beat cancer, that's not a skill, right? It takes a lot more. And that goes to what you said earlier about motivation. Nobody can instill motivation in you. They can create an environment where you can become motivated. And to a sense, they can push you to get motivated, but you need to believe. You need to have that faith. A lot of times we forget that, just how important that is.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for sharing your personal stories, your triumphs, and what you learned from your dad, to what you taught others, to the fact that at the end of the day, becoming a better version of ourselves, becoming a better leader, a better human being, it is a mindset. It is an intentional mindset, whether you're putting reminders on your phone or on, empty pieces of white paper. Start somewhere, because you will get much further than where you start off today. You just have to believe that you can do it. And I want to thank you for inspiring us with your stories and your knowledge, and hopefully soon your book. So thank you very much for being my unfiltered guest this evening. I wish you a wonderful start to your Tuesday morning, and stay blessed and stay unfiltered. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed. I've really enjoyed our chat. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening to Unfiltered, the show about authentic leadership and personal growth. Like what you heard? Click subscribe, share it, and tell a friend about it. And don't forget to leave a rating.